And then we're gonna go live on Facebook. Okay, so welcome to our last live presentation of the day. So this is the Poudre River Fest. This year we are going hybrid with our event. So we have 4 days of programming over 4 months. Today is our first day and our theme is all things wildlife. And we have Bird Conservancy of the Rockies again today to talk about citizen science conservation along the Poudre River Urban Corridor. So for those who don't know, the Poudre River Fest is put on by multiple organizations in the Fort Collins community. And these are those organizations that put on the event every single year. The Poudre River Fest is about more than just education. We also do restoration. So proceeds from the Poudre River Fest go to support restoration projects on the Cache-la Poudre River. So if you are able and interested, you can donate at poudreriverfest.org. And we actually will be announcing our restoration project on our final day of celebration on August 21st at New Belgium Brewery. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Rob, and he is going to have a great presentation for us this afternoon.
Great. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to share my screen now. While I share my screen, I think it would be great if people could type in the chat where they're from. I'm assuming mostly Colorado, but you never know. Okay. Did that work?
If you pull up your PowerPoint, I think we're seeing your browser. Okay, there you go. That's perfect.
Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, I'm Rob Sparks. I'm a spatial ecologist with Bird Conservancy of the Rockies.
Rob, real quick, I'm sorry. We're seeing your presenter view, so I don't know if you want to change it to just the slides.
Huh.
There should be at the top, it says, there's an option, yeah, maybe display setting. Swap presenter view and slideshow, that should be it.
Yeah, okay, that's grayed out for me. Huh.
Oh.
Here, let me
I mean, we can watch this too, but your notes are in there.
Yeah, that's not ideal. I'm gonna stop and reshare and see if that works.
I've had it happen to me a couple of times where there's like an update on Zoom and then it doesn't like my sharing settings. So
yeah, that I just did this a few days ago and it worked. So I know Zoom sometimes is a little finicky.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how about now?
That's perfect. Yep. You don't have to do anything. We can see the right thing right now.
Okay. It's still wanting to see my notes though, but anyways, okay, sounds good. I'll go by memory. So as I was saying, welcome everyone. I'm Rob Sparks. I'm a spatial ecologist with Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, and I'm going to be presenting on our citizen science Eastern Screech-owl project. And in this picture, you can see 2 Eastern Screech-owls in this snag. I'm sitting here in Fort Collins. I'm only a few blocks away from the Poudre River, so the Poudre River is a very special place. First, I just want to briefly introduce you to Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. We're a nonprofit conservation organization, and we have 3 teams that integrate, and they're all represented here in these pictures. So we're banding a mountain plover, so that represents science. In the middle picture, we have a rancher on the private ranch, and a lot of our stewardship team works and implements on the ground restoration projects. In the bottom right here, we have an education component here where we're inspiring the next generation. And our work radiates across the breeding and wintering ranges from the Rockies into Mexico. So please check us out if you're interested to find out more about us. So big picture, the state of our rivers, it provides many ecological and economic services as well as social services. And you could see a map here of the major rivers. However, less than 1/3 of the world's longest rivers remain free flowing. And many of our Western rivers face similar threats. So what are some of the threats of our Western rivers? Human modification, dams, which reduce river flow, and also diversion. So they alter the floodplain since rivers are no longer able to meander and create ribbons, which improves riparian habitat, as well as upstream mines, which could impact water quality. And in this picture, you could see a healthy abraded river and these patches interspersed with patches of riparian habitat. So here's a picture showing the Poudre River along the Poudre, actually the Poudre River bike trail runs along the south side here. And this aerial picture, let me turn on my pointer so I could show you guys what I'm talking about. So here where my pointer is Shield Street. And the bike trail runs along the river here. And then here's Overland. So you could see, and you've noticed that just how braided the river is here. And you could see some riparian habitat along the river. Now fast forward to present time, and you could see that the river's become channelized and it's less braided. And there's a lot less riparian habitat. So you could also see the gravel pit mines here along the river. And it's due to river flow and channelization that we lose the ability of the river to move laterally, limiting a healthy riparian forest. So here, I'm just going to touch on the importance of river flow rates, since they have they maintain key ecological functions. And so this hydrograph here, we have the months of the year along the x-axis, and we have river flow on the y-axis. And right now in May, we could see the river flow is increasing. So as we go along this graph, we could see the major functions that the river flow provides. So it actually, when there's a flooding events, it scours the banks and the uplands, and it's actually creates the ideal conditions for cottonwoods. However, currently the flow doesn't reach, so this dotted yellow line represents what we currently see during most years. So it's limits a lot of the ecological functions that the river provides. So river flow is very important. And now to focus on the Poudre River, here we have a inset of the Poudre River starting up in the mountains. And actually the Poudre River's headwaters is really close to the Colorado headwaters. However, they just flow in opposite directions. So as the Poudre River flows for 130 miles approximately, dropping about 7,000 feet. And in Fort Collins, it comes down into the grasslands. And here, I just have a picture showing a plains cottonwood, which is a keystone species, a tree species along the Poudre River. And then on the bottom map, we have the Poudre River urban corridor. And you could also see a lot of different natural areas along the river. So we have Watson Lake State Wildlife Area up here, and then flowing south, you could see the Environmental Learning Center down here. And then this extent is just showing our Eastern Screech-owl study extent. So it's ending here at River Bluffs open space. So our citizen science project started in 2013, and this Venn diagram shows the various components of our project, each feeding into each other. So we engage many community members within Fort Collins, as well as the greater Denver area. And we teach them how to follow a standardized protocol and learn how to become better stewards of the Poudre River. And then we use the data they collect and use science to inform management. So we help inform where management actions would be optimal for the Eastern Screech-owl. And here's another picture of an Eastern Screech-owl and its cavity. We're using this Eastern Screech-owl as our target species because it's an indicator species. So an indicator species reflects environmental conditions of where they're found. So the Eastern Screech-owl along the Poudre River is reflecting healthy riparian habitat. I have two pictures here. Here's a video. Not seeing the, there it is here. You could see it winking a few times. It's a really small owl, and interestingly enough, this owl here is perched in a crack willow. Crack willows is another common tree species along the Poudre River urban corridor. However, crack willows aren't native. So I've seen fewer cavities in crack willows than in cottonwoods. So this species is a good indicator species as well because it nests in secondary cavity. It's a secondary cavity nester. So it nests in mature cottonwood trees as well as box elders. So they're indicating a healthy riparian habitat. As I mentioned, this owl is a small owl. It's like the size of a football, and it comes in two color phases. The plumage comes in two colors. So the one out west usually is a gray morph, and that's the one that you usually see along the Poudre River. However, there has been a rufous morph here at the in Fort Collins for a few years now. They're very similar to the Western Screech-owl, and they're best distinguished by voice. The Western Screech-owl usually is more on the western slope, on the western side of the Rockies. The phenology of the Eastern Screech-owl, they start laying eggs in mid-April to May. So our program starts surveys in March and end in May. And then the incubation occurs for about 26 days, and then fledgling, they'll fledge after another 28 days. So our study design for our citizen science project is the same extent in the previous map. And here you could see Watson Lake State Wildlife Area in the upper northwest part of the extent, and then all the way down to River Bluffs open space. So we segmented the river into 500-meter segments, and then we're surveying the center point of these segments using a spatially balanced design. So we're able to actually use the data that citizen scientists collect. And we trained the community members to follow a standardized protocol, and we do repeat visits. It's called call playback, and then we do repeat visits to implement an occupancy modeling framework. So we survey repeatedly, and then we could also survey across years to have the temporal insight into what trends are, what's going on with their trends. We try to spread out our survey visits throughout the breeding season so we could capture the different heterogeneity and behavior, perhaps. And here's another picture showing the different color morphs, the different plumage colors here. Here's a slide showing, so we do a 10-minute call playback protocol, and it's a combination of silent listening and an active call playback using broadcasters. The objectives of, so the science aspect of it, our objectives are to understand how does riparian habitat connectivity, as well as the variation in vegetation height. So in the understory, there's also some subcanopy trees. Usually those are chokecherry or box elder trees. And then the number of habitat patches. How does all this influence Eastern Screech-owl occupancy dynamics? And those dynamics are the colonization and persistence. So this top graph is showing persistence. So the upper top graph, the dark boxes, so it's representing that our survey site is occupied. And then if you go directly across, it's still occupied. So that's persistence or survival. So that's what persistence means. And then the bottom graph is showing colonization. And so the white boxes represent unoccupied sites. So going from white to dark, it's becoming colonized. So just those are the dynamics we're trying to understand over time. And then with the multiple visits, we could include detection probability. And this graph is just showing that concept of sometimes when you're at a survey site, you could, and you do your survey, you could truly have the species there, but you just don't detect it, or it could truly be absent. So it's just a way of improving our precision to decrease bias. So now to get into some of what we've learned thus far, here's a graph showing the trend, occupancy trend from 2013 to 2018. And we're just plotting occupancy rates across the years. So we're seeing a pretty stable population. And keep in mind, this population that we're studying is on the western part of its range. So it occurs throughout eastern US, and then we're on the very western part of its range. So it's pretty stable. However, there's a slight contraction here. However, and we estimated there to be around 42 individuals along that within our study area. And what we're also learning is colonization is increasing with riparian connectivity. and also increases with fewer number of habitat patches. So this graph is showing colonization increasing. So on the y-axis, we have the percent patch importance. So how important is it to maintaining connectivity on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis, we have the number of distinct core areas, or you could think of it as habitat patches. And so we could see that as we go up, as we get into the bluer color, colonization is increasing. So you could, and closer to 0, where there's fewer habitat patches, its colonization is increasing. So the x-axis, distinct core areas, is also could be viewed as a fragmentation metric. So the more habitat patches, the more fragmented the habitat is. The fewer habitat patches, you know, it's more of a contiguous habitat patch. And then here you could also see our results spatially. Here's our the Poudre River again in Fort Collins, showing our study area, and then we're displaying colonization probabilities. So the darker colors in red are higher areas of colonization, and you could see higher areas of colonization in those circles. So I circled ELC area, Kingfisher natural areas area, and then McMurray natural area, and then towards kind of Watson Lake in the northwest part, there's areas of high colonization. And also you could visualize the patch importance, so the connectivity along the riparian corridor here. So it's great to see that riparian connectivity is matching up where there's higher areas of colonization. So these mapped areas could serve as a spatial prioritization and planning tool for the conservation managers. And then persistence, our survival, we're seeing that is increasing with more variation in vegetation height. So for an owl to stay and use the same site year after year, so they're persisting, we're seeing that that vegetation height and the understory is pretty important. Here you could see what we did was we used LiDAR data to look at vegetation height, and then to look at a measure of variation, we're using the standard deviation. And you can see in this map, it's showing one of our survey sites. So it's a 500 meter by 500 meter grid. And you can kind of see that the height in that grid. So that's how we're measuring vegetation height. And from these results, we could come up with some management recommendations. So some of our recommendations are to maintain riparian connectivity, because we saw that was improving owl colonization. So they're from an unoccupied site to, then they're occupying it more with a higher probability if there's more riparian connectivity. We're also seeing, and we also recommend increasing riparian habitat. So one of the observations we made is along the Poudre River urban corridor, we're seeing the riparian habitat is pretty narrow. So there's no lateral movement. They are restricted in some areas by urbanization, of course, but I think there is an opportunity to increase the lateral area along the river to increase riparian habitat. We also recommend promoting variation in vegetation height. So having different heights in vegetation will help also increase these owl populations. There is also, if some of you may have noticed, as you walk along or bike along the Poudre River, a lot of areas don't have understory. It's just grass or bare. And so by increasing the understory vegetation height, using, there's a lot of chokecherry or box elder or snowberry, wild rose. It'll also increase biodiversity. And finally, the map areas of high connectivity and colonization could be used for a planning tool. And we've shared our layers with the City of Fort Collins Natural Areas Department. And I have a few slides showing some of the restoration along the river. So the City of Fort Collins Natural Areas is leading a restoration effort, and they're doing a really good job. One of the major restoration efforts they did was, I think, right after the flood in 2013, or during the flood, they lowered the riverbank along near McMurray Natural Area. So that's around Shields Street, where it intersects the bike trail all the way down. And that just a few 50 feet or 100 feet down to McMurray, they lowered the riverbank so that they're connecting it to the floodplain. And that allows for the river to flood over and scour some cottonwood seeds. And now you can see a lot of cottonwoods germinating and growing in that area. So, and then in this picture here, we helped the city purchase some wetland maps, some native wetland mats. So there's native sedges and rushes in there, and we rolled them out. And this is North Shields Ponds natural area. And then here's another picture showing where we helped plant some shrubs along Udall natural area. So to improve the understory there. And I'd like to end with this picture here. So a healthy Poudre River means a healthy community. And I think it'll be important for us to maintain and improve not only riparian habitat, but as well as maintaining the river flow. So I want to thank everybody for listening and being part of the Poudre River Fest. And I think we have some time for questions, but we'll see. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And we'd love to, we have Rob in this little moment, so we might as well take advantage of his wealth of knowledge. I think it's such a wonderful thing. What would you say is the best advice if somebody wants to really get started with some citizen science work?
Yeah, I think that, definitely we're always interested in recruiting volunteers. So check out our website for opportunities. There's a lot of other local conservation organizations that have volunteer opportunities. The City of Fort Collins. So just looking into your local environmental groups, but Bird Conservancy would be very happy to have more involvement from our community members.
Awesome. You did get a question in the chat, Rob. It's how many eggs are laid and what is survival probability of young?
Okay. The number of eggs vary from on average from 1 to 3. The fledgling survival probability, I haven't seen many studies. I know that the species is really well studied, but off of the top of my head, I'm not sure. I think usually fledgling survival is definitely low, and it varies by species.
Awesome. Well, Rob, thank you again so much for joining us this afternoon. You capped off our live events for our Wildlife Day, and I think it was the perfect ending for us. Just a reminder for everyone, the Poudre River Fest is hybrid this year. So we have four days over 4 months. So today was our day, all things wildlife. Our next Poudre River Fest day is June 25th. And we are going to be talking about all things recreation centered on and around the Poudre River. So we'd love to have you join us. The best thing to do is to join our newsletter list at poudreriverfest.org, where we send out updates and information on the schedule, where you can register for these live events or find information on all of our other virtual programming. So Rob, thank you again. So
Great,
glad
thank you.
to have you. And everybody enjoy your wonderful weekend.